Zookeepers of Reddit, how are the animals acting differently now that there are no visitors to the zoo? I'm late to the thread, so I'm sure this will get buried, but I work for a very large, very busy as a zoo. I work with the ambassador animals, so they are animals that are very used to the public. Pretty much like what everyone else has said, the animals are mostly confused that there aren't any people. Our petting zoo animals in particular are super needy. The second they see or hear us, they all come running over and start crying for attention. We are trying to give all the animals as much attention as possible, but we are down to a bare bones crew, so it's not as much as we would like. What I wanted to add, though, because I think it's incredibly interesting, is that we are collecting fecal samples from some of the animals to be tested for cortisol levels, which is a pretty good indicator of stress levels. That way, when guests come back, we can take samples for comparison to see how much guests impact stress. I think it's really cool that we are taking this opportunity to see what we can learn about how guests impact the animals, and to see if there are potentially things we can do even better to improve the lives of the animals in our care. We were really hoping to do some behavioral studies too about things like activity levels, amount of the enclosure being utilized, etc. that are also important considerations for their welfare, but unfortunately we just don't have the time or staffing. Most of our animals are happy as long as we can keep their routines, feeding times, etc. For some they need a little extra. We do public encounters with our koalas, wombats, and snakes among others, so we spend an hour or so a day cuddling and handling these animals to keep them happy. A few of our koalas really fret if they don't get their cuddles. Otherwise we just try to continue to spend time with animals that are expecting human interaction, and of course we can take things for walks around the place, like I'm sure you've seen at other zoos. Our wombats love a run and sniff, dingoes as well. Edit. Thanks all for the interest, questions, and remarks. Thanks also for the awards. I don't work at Australia Zoo for those of you asking. I do live on Kangaroo Island and our facility is pretty easy to find with some light searching. It is a privilege to work with wildlife each and every day, and it's something I take very seriously, but still appreciate the jokes and humor from everyone. If you have specific questions it's perhaps best to DM me, Ripin Barks, otherwise they'll probably get lost in the comments. Thanks again. Your job is to cuddle koalas, and I'm stuck in home all alone. For a lot of our animals, having the ability to interact with guests is actually extremely important. Even for primates to be able to play with kids through the glass, they are missing out on a lot of enrichment. Guests keep a lot of the monkeys entertained. I watch our guests all day long show our marmosets and capuchin selfie cameras, and they love to see their reflection. Guests will also show videos on their phones to animals, and the monkeys totally enjoy it. We have a rescue cockatoo named Ro who sings row 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 your boat to guests. When little kids dance and sing it to her, she gets really excited and feeds off their energy. So do our other cockatoos on exhibit. But now without guests to show off for, every now and then, when it's quiet we'll hear her start row row row, and then she stop and huffs a bit and gets really quiet and sad because she has no one to sing to. Some of our animals really miss having kids to show off for. You also have to remember that animals in zoos for the most part have grown up totally accustomed to being around people 24/7. They are not wild animals at all really. They've grown up in a very different social dynamic. Quite a few animals get noticeably depressed in the winter months every year when we have few guests, and then perk up in the spring when we get busy. My girlfriend is a zookeeper and animal behaviorist. She says their animals are becoming stressed. One of their African greybads has been plucking his own feathers. She also mentioned that, because they can't touch many of the animals due to the virus potentially spreading to another zookeeper, many of the animals are looking and acting depressive, not eating well, etc. That's it everyone, you're making the bird sad. Y'all are in timeout. But them being in timeout is what's making the birds sad. In our local zoo the apes started to miss the visitors, so they brought in an artist in who's now just painting in the empty monkey house, so the apes have someone to watch. Edit. Whoa, this blew up overnight. Europe. They could tell they missed the visitors because they became very bored and are much more excited about the keepers than usual. Apparently they watch the visitors as much as the other way around. The keepers now have to pay them more attention too, and they also do stuff like hide food for them as a game also. Sorry for the confusion. I'm not as a keeper myself, but I live close by the zoo, and it was in the local news and such. They need a TV in Sesame Street. Just put on a Planet of the Apes marathon and they'll be happy for hours. Due to temporary staff cuts, they no longer have the people to regularly walk the wombats. Some of the wombats are holding the keepers personally responsible. Imagine having a 20 kg chunk of muscle with big rodent teeth mad at you. Can confirm. I'm not happy with the current situation. Oh shit, they are amongst us. My wife works at the gift shop for our zoo and the other day we had to go move some stuff around in the store because due to some heavy rains, it had flooded a bit. Of course we took a lap around the empty park, other than the keepers and few maintenance workers, and found that all the animals were really active and playful. A lot of them seemed really curious about us too. I'm sure they get used to seeing crowds every day and were starving for attention. I've been in a zoo early when no one else was around, and the animals were all super active and engaging. There's a bit of a balance of different behaviors that is kinda interesting. With no visitors there is more time for enrichment, to get more creative with said enrichment, trialing new things, and exposure to enrichment that has to be supervised, which the animals are loving. Then there are certain animals that do seem to miss having public around. Our younger, 5 years old, African penguins are really seeming to miss being able to swim at the glass and interact with people. Higher intelligent animals we have had to come up with new interactions. Lots of new training going on because they are missing the variety and variability of interactions with the public. The snakes don't give a fuck though. I take care of fish, but mostly jellyfish. The jellies don't give a single fuck. It's been nice for me though, because I can turn most of their display lights off so less algae grows, and I have to do less scrubbing. My actual fish don't care. The beluga whales were screeching at the cleaning crew the other day, which was hilarious. I don't work with the whales, but it seems like they enjoy, or are at least interested in, seeing others around. Do jellies care if there's light, as long as they're fed? Some species grow algae in their tentacles as a food source, like corals do, so those guys need good, consistent lighting. Otherwise it seems to not matter too much. They are also in areas that receive ambient lighting while we are working. While it isn't direct light, they are still experiencing a relatively normal light cycle. I work on an activity farm. There is a 22-year-old Shire horse. He acts like a dick when there are customers around. With no customers, he's actually still a dick. That being said, he's still awesome. Edit. I've been asked what he does when there are customers. Basically, if he sees any customer feeding any other animal in the large barn where he hangs out in the day, he will stare at them and stomp his front hoof on the ground. That guarantees they look at him. If they don't immediately come over to feed him, he will start kicking the heavy metal bars that divide his area and the pen next door. This makes one hell of a noise, and he will keep it up, all whilst staring at the person with the food. If they feed him, then he rewards them by slobbering all over their hands as he takes the food. Also, at the end of the day he is really good at telling the time. He knows when we close and what time he should be released from the barn and taken to the field/stables where he spends the night. If he isn't let out bang on time, he starts kicking the shit out of the gate at the back of his pen. This is a big metal gate, and it sounds like someone playing a giant glockenspiel with a sledgehammer. He will keep this up until it is opened. Some customers are just scared to hand feed him. He is massive and his mouth is big enough to easily fit someone's hand in. Some customers come up to me with their bag of food and ask me if I will feed him because he keeps staring at me, but I'm a bit too nervous to feed him. I happily oblige. I love that ornery old bastard. Finally, a thread I can answer. Not a whole lot of change, but animals definitely missing out some enrichment of seeing guests, especially the otters that follow the kids in the glass underwater. Takin, maned wolves, bison, gibbons, bopies, lions, etc. all are about the same. Some of our animals that are skittish have been standing closer to the fence where guests usually are. Zebras, gazelle, which is nice. It's kinda this weird balance of being both more and less stressed. On the one side, I don't have to worry about keeper talks or BTS tours and I have more time to get everything done and spend more time with animals. On the other side, we are skeleton crewed and there's less of us to care for the whole zoo, so I'm working a lot more in areas I don't usually cover as often. There's one kangaroo that still tries to box me, while the emu is shifting. The one peacock still really doesn't like taking his medications, of course. I have noticed that the crows in the city are behaving a bit differently as well, and are being a lot braver lol. Not as a keeper, but I hear the lions a bit more from my house now. Weirdly reassuring to wake up to and realize the world is still going on. Wait, what? Do you live on the plains of Africa, next to the GW Zoo, or do you own lions? Nothing that exotic. Sorry to disappoint. I live very close to a large zoo in the UK. No Carol Baskin-esque dramas. The city's gotten pretty quiet with all the events going on, so the zoo noises are a lot more prominent. Can just about see the orangutans rolling about and playing hide and seek with their blankets outside if I shimmy out the Velux onto the roof.